to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege of having somebody we're all a fan of on today who was a Democratic candidate for president. He stepped down, but he had a great run and had a great showing. Matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Julián Castro. Julian, what's happening?
Hey, good to be with y'all.
Now, all of us really enjoyed learning about you during this last presidential run. Matter of fact, we have someone on the show who is not a voter. His name is Shawnee Culture, but he did. What was the thing you did online where you?
Yeah, it was.
I made him take a quiz, okay? The I side with quiz that breaks down policy. So I said, take it. Yeah. And I just want to, because I was trying to, just trying to make him think about, where he stands, and I want to encourage him to vote. And the results was that he was all about Julián Castro.
Yeah, you had to
There you go. There you go. Well, I hope, you know what? I wish that I had been on the New York ballot then. So I would have gotten one more vote. Hopefully you're registered now to vote.
No, he's not. He's not.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's a continual problem.
Yeah, and you weren't there anymore for me. You know what I'm saying? And you were the one who had all the principles that I stand behind.
So,
too.
Julian, with that,
thank you.
With that, right? And I want to start there for people who are still. What I call them in some regards is disrespectful, but I call them immature voters, right? People who don't have voting experience, haven't paid attention since before, may have voted for Barack, right? Because he was a black man and they were just enthused by the reality that our nation had got to this point. They ran out and voted and thought that the president just gets to walk in and do whatever they want and make whatever changes they want and do whatever they say they're going to do. And don't really realize that they have to figure out how to get their ideas across the line through a process. I would like for you to speak to people who say, voting right now is voting for the lesser of two evils, right? I don't like Biden. I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump more than I dislike Biden, but I just don't like the idea of settling. Can you speak to that? And what do you tell people who are just learning how to participate in our voting system, how to, figure that out in their brains?
Yeah, this is something that my family has experience with. I wouldn't be in politics. I wouldn't have run for office ever if I hadn't grown up with my mom, who was a Chicana activist when she was young. She just turned 73.
Shout to mom.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Chicano pride, La Raza. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. There you go. So she was involved in the Chicano movement of the late 60s and early 70s, and she was actually part of a third party called the Raza Unida Party in the 70s. And the idea behind that party was that at the time, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats were doing enough for the Latinx community. You had huge dropout rates, total underinvestment in neighborhoods, obviously mistreatment in the criminal justice system. This is obviously a familiar story, not only for the Latinx community, but the Black community, other communities. And so she was involved in a third party for a few years. There are merits to that in certain situations. But what I learned from that was, eventually she became a Democrat again, is that you have to do both of those things. You have to aspire. You have to reach for the country, the community that we want. And at the same time, what I saw in that activism was that we're not going to make progress overnight. That, in the system that we have set up in this country, in our democracy, that it's going to take time. And so what you have to do is you have to be as strategic as possible to achieve that progress, election after election after election. And to realize the different components of that. Like one of the things we realized was that there was a time in our country where we thought that if we just elected a whole bunch of Black and brown people, that would solve everything.
Right.
But that on top of that, you need people that are actually going to have the courage and the wisdom to make the right choices when they have the decision to make in office of which direction they're going to take things. So I would say to those people that say, hey, I feel like I don't want to vote for the lesser. I would say, look, first of all, I would give Joe Biden more credit than that. I mean, he is running with the most progressive platform of any Democratic nominee when you actually look at, what's on the table, what he has proposed, what has come out of his own campaign and his own mouth. And then on top of that, it's a new day. I mean, y'all saw that the other day in New York, right? With Mondaire Jones, Jamal Bowman, some great candidates. I mean, if you want to know the direction that something's going to go in, it's not just about the people in office, it's about the people pushing them. It's about what's happening on the ground. So I would say to those voters, look, there's reason to have hope. There's reason to have confidence, not only in this candidate, but also in the movement, in the way that things are going in this country. So don't give up hope, cast a vote, and we can make sure that we move in the right direction on all of the issues that you care about, man. Like, whether it's making sure that we serve things other than big corporations, healthcare for every single person in this country, something that's going to hit y'all very quickly with an evictions crisis as evictions get filed.
That's right.
Housing, that everybody has a safe, decent, affordable place to live in this country. All of those things, we can make progress. I would say that you know what? If we're honest, it's never going to be as fast as we would want it to be,
or as ideal. It's never ideal.
That's right. But it will be there. It will be there.
Now, how?
Julian,
go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
Julian, when you were running for president, you were one of the candidates that was standing very strong and very vocal when it came to accountability, police reform. And even till present day, I follow you on Twitter. You are constantly a huge supporter of Black Lives Matter, and you are constantly pointing out all the different cases, all the different instances where we need change. Tell me about where that comes from personally for you, because I think that's one of the reasons that Shawnee culture was interested in you, because it's something that's very passionate to all of us. But tell us, where does that come from, and where do you stand today?
Yeah, when I was on the campaign trail, we got to go to Iowa, we got to go to New Hampshire. These are the first two states. In just about every single stump speech that I gave, whether I was in Davenport, Iowa, or in, Concord, New Hampshire, wherever, I would include in my stump speech the part about making changes to our policing system. And I would say the names oftentimes of Black Americans who had been killed at the hands of police. And I did that because even though sometimes I would get these quizzical looks like, why are you talking about that? Especially you can imagine in Iowa and New Hampshire. And it seemed at the time like that was a hot issue in 2016, where in that cycle they were coming on after what had happened to Michael Brown and, Ferguson and all of the movement there. What I know is that that's a reality that especially a lot of young Black men and women and, brown men and women have to deal with all the time. I didn't see it as a timely issue. I saw it as a timeless issue. And so I wanted to speak to some of the things that I thought we needed to do to change it, to make a difference. I also, with that issue, you can probably tell, on Twitter, I think I'm always respectful, but there's something about that issue that gets to me personally, because not only is it a tragedy when you see a situation like George Floyd or any of the people that we've spoken their names, but it's also the grossest, most vile abuse of authority against people because of who they are, and such a disregard for their life because of who they are, and goes against everything that we should stand for as a people that believes in real democracy, and that you put the people above the powerful, right? Because I think that too oftentimes, not everybody, obviously, but too oftentimes you have these police officers that feel as though you're there to serve them, that the people are there to serve them, instead of they're there to serve the people. And that really gets to me.
Well, because it's bullying. Because it's bullying. That's why it's bullying. It's abuse. It is textbook abuse of power and bullying. And it for some reason. We know the reasons, but for some reason, still today, we have a hard time processing the fact that these individuals are paid for through tax dollars, yet they walk around the street in a uniform provided to them by the government, which is paid by tax dollars, and they have the license to kill, but when they make mistakes, there's no accountability. When they abuse their power, there's no accountability. And it's gotten out of hand. Like, it's been out of hand in the black community for a long time, and now the cameras are on everybody's phones and everybody can see what black people have been talking about for generations. You know, this happened during the civil rights movement when the cameras turned on and you saw police letting dogs attack demonstrators and spraying them with fire hoses. And the brutality that was taking place, that's one of the things that galvanized the movement at that time, was the fact that the things people had been telling the mainstream about, now you have documented proof. And now, and what I see happening today is a shift, even more so than during the civil rights movement, where we can't just take a police officer's word for what happened. That's why we have body cams. You know, in the Breonna Taylor incident in murder in Kentucky, they didn't even fill out the damn police report. There's no information on the police report. Like, that in itself should be a reason for you to lose your job. Yet and still, in the Breonna case, only one officer's been fired. No justice has taken place. You guys didn't fill out a police report where there was a murder and gunshots.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're right. I mean, if we boil it down, it's that people feel like they can act with impunity.
Right.
Even when somebody loses their life.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's nothing's going to happen to them. And you know, if we think about how did we get here, I mean, we got here through a whole history of, you know, beginning with the use of policing in this country to essentially oppress, you know, particularly Black men and women, to generations of a system that did not require accountability or transparency, essentially let it go by without real accountability and transparency. You know, even the laws that were set up, I mean, there in New York, y'all, you know, the legislature repealed 50A,
right,
which was law that shielded personnel records. I mean, think about that. What other job, especially if you're a public servant, do you get to totally run away from your history?
Right.
You know, it didn't make any sense. We've built up, you know, over time, these different protections that, again, to me, resemble almost like the people are there to serve them instead of they're there to serve the people. And, you know, again, I don't want people to take this the wrong way. I know that we have a lot of, you know, well-intentioned and, you know, you do have professional officers. We can people can disagree about, in theory, whether, you know, what policing should look like, or if it should be alternative public safety and so forth. You do have some folks that are good. And so I don't want to suggest that everybody has had these types of issues. But as I said many times in the campaign, I don't think that it's just a problem of a few bad apples. That we need
and the reason you say that is because if you're not actively trying to fix the problems and you're an officer, how can, and this is me talking, how can I consider you a good police officer just because you're not doing the actual bad stuff? You're not actively calling out the people that you know are doing the bad things. So how are you good?
Yeah.
You're allowing this behavior to take place by not calling it out.
Yeah, and that's the culture. That is the culture that is developed in a lot of police departments. You know, it's almost like there's a problem from the outside in that a lot of politicians are not requiring that kind of transparency or accountability because they're afraid of the police unions, right, at the local level.
That's right.
And at the federal level, they're just, you know, I mean, President Obama started in that direction, but needs to be much more fundamental change in the years to come. But then from the inside, from the police officer's perspective, you know, I mean, probably if we were to have an honest conversation with somebody, they would say, look, you know, what I'm facing is that if I do that, basically I'm worried about my own safety and or, you know, that's it. I have no future I have no future in this department.
Or I don't get the rate. I get passed over for raises. I get looked past for promotions. I get disciplined heavy-handed. They don't allow me to take the vacations with vacation time that I want with my family. They ruin the quality of life of the police officers that are speaking out. But that in itself speaks to why we as a society need to be more upset by this behavior, because how is it that even society is saying, hey, something's wrong with you, and your stance becomes one of defensiveness and more bullying?
Yeah.
That is a serious problem.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that over and over, especially, maybe the worst example was from recent news was when that elderly man was pushed to the ground
in Buffalo
and started bleeding out in Buffalo. And then the two officers that were disciplined for that, his colleagues lined up, the union lined up and started clapping, applauding these guys for what?
And then 50 officers resigned from that squad that was, and refused to do that detail. Like what?
Yeah.
It's obscene. Honestly, it's obscene.
Needless to say,
it's obscene.
Big changes.
Julián Castro, you brought up politicians feeling safe when dealing with local police unions. And now we're seeing tremendous police reform being pushed through the House and a federal bill. Do you feel, and you kind of just talked about, at the local level, people afraid of police unions. And I think on a national level, people have been afraid to be not in alignment with police, to get reelected, or bad press coming out about them, or even bullying in the press where, your personal lives get put on display by, police officers going and getting your information and leaking out your business about your family. So we've seen that happen. But do you feel like politicians right now feel that the communities are rallying behind them, and that's why some of these bills that the Black Caucus has had for years that haven't been able to move through are now moving faster?
No, absolutely. I mean, look, several pollsters that, do polling on issues all the time. In the last 3 weeks, what they've said has been, hey, I've never seen this kind of sea change in public opinion on an issue. The American public is in a totally different place on this issue right now versus, a month and 2 days ago when George Floyd was still alive. And what that means is when you see politicians moving that quickly, willing to do legislation like that, it's not like many of them didn't agree with it before, but many of them, frankly, were not willing to put their name on the dotted line, to put their political future on the line for this issue. But what it means is that that's not happening in a vacuum, that the people themselves are having an impact. Everybody in the street, folks showing up to City Hall and, going to the citizens to be heard, the folks that call in or email those congressional offices saying, you better do this. It's making a difference. It's making a difference. And so I hope that people keep it up.
Go ahead, Laura.
We recently had a sigh of relief when it comes to Dreamers here in the United States, right? With the DACA program, but we're not safe yet. Can you talk about the future of DACA, what you see happening, and things that people should know? Because I often talk about the misconceptions that people have when it comes to Dreamers. I explained to people, I was like, do you know that Dreamers pay taxes? People are not eligible for scholarships and grants. And, everyone always falls to the obvious stereotypes that people try to push all the time. But explain to us what it means for Dreamers right now, and what do you see happening right now in the future?
Yeah, well, you're right. Last week was wonderful news from the Supreme Court. You're also right, though, that this is just temporary. There were a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief. A lot of families out there that were worried, that their brother, their sister, their husband or wife, that person would suddenly face deportation to a country that they don't identify with oftentimes. As has been said many times, they feel fully American. They're part of this country. 1/3 of them could also be classified as essential workers. And 30,000 Dreamers are frontline healthcare workers. As you know, many of them are in school, in other types of jobs where they're helping move our economy forward. Some of them are in the military. So, I mean, these are folks that are helping our nation progress. We need them. The answer is that we need a permanent solution to this. And on this issue, like on a lot of other issues, I mean, it's really night and day between Trump and Biden. The first thing that Trump did was say, okay, Supreme Court, we're going to have another go at it. You know, we're going to try and get this done again in court with this case down in Texas. Whereas Biden has said, which I think is the right thing, look, we need a permanent solution to this. I'm committed to it. I will push it early in my administration. Also, he's committed to other immigration reforms that are important, that would make a huge difference in the lives of people out there. So this country, you know, what I found is that on the issue of Dreamers, the majority of Democrats, the majority of independents, the majority of Republicans even, which tells you a lot, agree that we should provide some sort of path for them to become American citizens. And I agree with that. We should. So there is no reason that we shouldn't be able to accomplish this in the next administration. That, even if it's a standalone DREAM Act, you know, if you took that first, we should be able to get that done. There are no excuses anymore for why we can't get that done. You know, if people are willing to have the courage to actually do what they say they're going to do.
Julian, is that DREAM Act, would that be something that's permanent, or do these acts, you know, how do you through policy make something permanent? I mean, even today, with the Affordable Care Act, you have Trump pushing the Supreme Court to try to take, you know, and get rid of the Affordable Care Act right now during a pandemic when 40 million plus people don't have jobs. As you talked about, we have this eviction crisis on the horizon when, you know, mortgage, you know, people who own buildings are going to have to pay their mortgages and renters are going to have to pay their rent. They still don't work. How do we make these things permanent?
Well, you're right. You know, I mean, look, let's face it. What we've been seeing is this swing back, you know, with elections more often in the last, 15 years, right? Where one party will be in power and they'll do this and then they'll come back the other direction. But I think with this one, with the DREAM Act, I mean, it's going to be crucial to get the legislation done. Once you have the legislation done, I don't think you're ever going to go back on that. It's possible. But again, it's grounded in the people. There's support for this among Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Maybe most importantly, and folks in the you know, Latina community will know this, we need to get people, once that law is actually in place, to go and start the process of becoming a citizen. I know I'm Mexican American. I know that you still for years have folks who could, you know, many who could have become citizens that did not actually apply for different reasons. Some of them, you know, they just never got around to it. Some of them, down here in South Texas, you know, they still had a family in Mexico, and for whatever reason, like, people need to move and apply, start the process that they're going to be on. Even when they get that process, though, it's, you know, what has been talked about in the past has been that it's going to take years, right? So we're in for a long, tough haul. And fight, but I do think that we can preserve it, because on that one, I don't think that we're going to go backward. I wouldn't say that about other provisions and changes that we can make in immigration law, because I think that they're going to be more susceptible to going backward in the future, even if we get a victory. But on the DREAM Act, I feel pretty good that we can keep progress on that.
You spoke out in favor of reparations when you were running for president. And some sort of solution for the transgressions, both physically and economically against Black Americans. Can you tell us more about that and what the conversations are in Washington right now? I know there's some research being done and some information that Kamala and Cory Booker and others are putting together to try to really come with something of substance on how to deal with reparations for Black Americans.
Yeah, I enjoyed the opportunity to address this on the campaign trail. I was actually glad that this was an issue that came up early on in maybe March, April of 2019, and that the candidates had to put forward their vision for this. I have long felt that there ought to be reparations for Black Americans, for particularly the descendants of slaves, and for different reasons. I mean, we can look at it in a legal sense that under our Constitution, if you take somebody's property, if the government takes somebody's property, not human property, that that person is owed compensation. Well, to me, it doesn't make sense then that if you treated people as property, why would you not owe, in this case, their descendants, with basically their estate, compensation for that? We can look at it morally. I believe that this is a moral debt that the country still owes. We have taken advantage of a lot of moral assets, things that the country has done well over the years, but we haven't paid this moral debt of slavery. So what I support is, number one, HB 40, which Sheila Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Jackson Lee out of Houston, has proposed that would establish a commission to make a recommendation to the Congress and the president about how it should move forward with reparations. I also believe that, you're going to get to some form of what does that actually look like? In my mind, what it looks like is a combination of all of the investments that people have talked about to do better and do right by the Black community in this country. And it also looks like a form of individual addressing of the wrong. I do think, though, that, and I said this many times, in this case, in order to get something like that done, like the process is almost as important as the actual result. Because as you know, I mean, when you start asking folks out there, do you support this? Most people, they say, what? If we just took all voters.
That's right.
Right. So if the Congress were ever going to gain the confidence and the president going to gain the confidence that, okay, this is how we should do it, it needs, this body of people that are very well respected from different communities that could put together a plan of how it would be done. That's how we would do it if we're serious about actually getting it done. And, having been in public service as a mayor, as HUD secretary, I know that it doesn't matter how liberal you are or how conservative you are. You actually need to have a plan to get something done, and you need to make sure that it works. I mean, look at all these governors right now, including my governor in Texas, that didn't follow public health advice from experts, but they thought that they could either just ignore this virus or, somehow small ball it, not address it. Their ideology went up against an actual pandemic, and, science is going to win. Well, I say that to say that I know that there's a lot of passion on that issue, and I embrace that. I believe that we should do something. We also need to make sure, because we'll only have one shot, that you do the right process so that you can actually get it done.
Right, because, not following processes is how things often fail, which is why we're seeing a level of failure around COVID-19, which you just referenced, because people didn't follow the processes. People, as administration, weren't disciplined. They weren't communicative. And this happened, COVID-19 happened fast, right? But scientists, you had Obama's administration had left behind a book that nobody paid attention to, and there's evidence of Obama talking about this in 2015 and planning for the future. Nobody paid attention to that. You have the fact that people at the CDC were tried, the current administration with Trump tried to silence people at the CDC when the information was coming out. Nobody listened to the World Health Organization because they're too in favor of China or whatever bullshit they're shoveling today from the White House. But then now we're seeing Texas, your state, Arizona, Utah, California, the Carolinas, Florida, and Alabama have not only just increases in cases, because of course there's more testing, so there's going to be more cases, but increases in hospitalizations, which is the real scary factor.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Like, so here in Texas, the hospitals, especially in the major counties, they are inching closer to full capacity. And that's the breaking point. I don't have to tell anybody there in New York that that's what policymakers are working to prevent. You don't want to get anywhere close to reaching that full capacity, because once that happens, that means that people that then contract the virus that need medical attention are not able to get it. And that you literally will have people dying at home. That already has happened in instances. But even more so if you reach hospital capacity. And there's so many people that need treatment on a daily basis for other emergencies that are completely unable to get the treatment they need. So it becomes a bigger disaster once that capacity is reached. This is just another example of how ideology has overcome reason for a lot of the right wing. They just play to their base and play to their base and play to their base, whether the issue is the Confederate flag that we're talking about these days, or a virus that can actually kill you. And we're seeing has killed more than 120,000 Americans already. How long can a political party go, lifting up broken ideology instead of actually being reasonable?
Are you planning to run for senator of Texas?
No, right now I'm not aiming for any office. For the first time in a long time, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing. I may run again. I may run, in the state. I may run again nationally in the future. But many times, I've had a sense of, okay, I think that I would run for this in 2 years, 4 years. Right now, I legitimately am. I recognize I could do that, but I'm not ready to go. And I think part of that is because I just got, just a few months ago, got done with the presidential race.
Okay, so Joe Biden comes to you tomorrow and says, hey, Julian, I'd love for you to be a part of my cabinet. What job do you want?
That's probably a conversation that I would have with Joe Biden, if you don't mind.
I'm just saying, share with us. We people now, man. You're a friend of the show now, man. Come on.
I would say that, no, I had that conversation once with President Obama and was very honored to serve the Obama-Biden administration. And so who knows? But I guess the best way to say it is that I'm open to what the future brings. And these last 3 months have been so different for everybody. But for me, it was like a complete 180 because I've been on the road 70% of the time. And I have gotten to spend more time with my children, who are 11 and 5, my daughter and son, which has been nice. And hopefully I'll both get to keep doing more of that, but then also figure out a way to continue to elect good people. I have a PAC called People First Future that is trying to elect people that will lift up these values that we embraced in the campaign. And we just released a whole slate of people that on policing that are going to embrace the right changes that we need to make.
And these are people that are running for office or already elected?
Both, but mostly running for office. For instance, Ayanna Pressley is a good example of somebody we endorsed that is in office. A guy named George Gascon is running for DA of Los Angeles County. A guy named Jose Gapsa is running for DA of Travis County.
And it's people first?
People First Future.
People First Future. Man, what a terrible situation down there with the LAPD, right? Just generations of corruption.
Yeah.
The LAPD is in shambles, man.
Yeah. No, in Los Angeles, y'all, of course, people know the Rodney King incident, but people will remember that after that, LAPD had the Rampart scandal. If any of y'all, I don't know if anybody's from LA, or you remember that Rampart scandal, which was widespread corruption in the Los Angeles Police Department. Recently, the case that is starting to get more attention is out of the LA Sheriff's Department. A young man named Andres Guardado.
Yes.
Who lost his life.
He was a security guard. They shot him in the back.
Yeah, and there's witness testimony that says that they shot him in the back, that he did not pose any threat. They put a hold on the autopsy, so we don't know what the autopsy says. It's another one of these cases where you just go, what in the hell is happening here? I can't believe that there's not more transparency and that what we have is a dead 18-year-old young man.
And they destroyed camera footage too, right? Is that
so there's a guy named Memo Torres that if folks go on Twitter, it's LA Taco is like the outfit that they do video. And, I wasn't familiar with it until I saw it on Twitter. He did an interview with the owner/manager of the auto shop where Andres worked. And the guy's going and showing where they ripped out these video cameras and the footage. The LA County Sheriffs did that. And, people were wondering, well, that's weird. And then they put a hold on the autopsy. They've had scandal in the recent past to begin with, including, if I remember right, they were the law enforcement entity that was harassing people Black Americans who lived in Section 8 housing that neighbors were uncomfortable with. It was a weird case where essentially the sheriffs were almost doing the dirty work of neighbors that didn't want certain people living in their neighborhood. So they have a lot to answer for. And it's just one more example of why people need to keep pushing for changes in that system.
Yeah, you guys go check out the website. I was just thumbing through it. peoplefirstfuture.com. There's a lot of people running in Texas. November 3rd is going to be a big day in Texas.
Yeah, no doubt. We got a chance to get a new Democratic senator for the first time in basically 30 years and get John Cornyn out of there.
You guys were behind Mondaire Jones here in New York. I think, didn't he just win the other day? Or are they still counting?
I think, I declared him the winner that night. Before yes.
And Jamal Bowman too.
I believe that he's on track to win, although there may be votes still being counted and all that.
Before we let you go, you guys are behind somebody that I'm really excited about, Charles Booker, down for U.S. Senate in Kentucky. You guys, everybody saw the voter suppression taking place in many states, but Georgia was a mess. Kentucky, a mess. In a county, I think it's Jefferson County, 610,000 voters. They had one voting location at a fairground with hours of traffic to get into the fairground before you even got a chance to wait in line to go vote. So it was a disaster. Can this vote? I hear there's a bill now that Mitch McConnell everybody could vote on to improve the Voting Rights Act. Can you impart some wisdom on us on when this thing got this bad? Because I think it was Supreme Court, John Roberts, that basically gutted it, and how much work it's going to take to get this back corrected. How did we get here, and how do we get back to a better place?
Yeah, so the deal is that under the Voting Rights Act, certain states that had a history of discrimination, basically of disenfranchising people, finding every little way and big way that they could so that people couldn't exercise their right to vote. They used to have to get what was called pre-clearance from the Department of Justice on how they were going to run their election, including the availability of voting sites. And then there's a Supreme Court case that came along as you mentioned, where, among others, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, eviscerated that section from the Voting Rights Act and famously said, essentially, well, we're kind of over that, over this kind of discrimination.
All right, so stop right there. The federal government recognized that there were some racist-ass states with a history of being racist assholes. The federal government stepped in and said, hey, because of your history, we need to see how you're going to handle voting because you have a history of being a-holes. Yeah. That's the law. Supreme Court came along and said, all right, we're beyond that. These states with a history of being a-holes don't now have to show us provide us any plans. Go ahead and continue and do whatever it is, and now they're back to being racist assholes again.
That's you put it so well.
Pretty much.
But so basically, to your question, since that case, well, what do you think has happened? They've found 1,000,001 ways to start cutting people out of the process, right? Make it harder, including, as you mentioned, cutting voting sites. Texas has been one of the biggest offenders of that. But you get other states like Kentucky. We know what happened in Georgia. I mean, that guy's sitting in the governor's mansion because he threw people off the rolls and found other ways to
It happened here in by the way, it happened here in New York. It happened here in New York. Like, and so even with whatever you guys end up doing with the Voting Rights Act moving forward, and you know this, even within the Democratic Party and the establishment Democratic situation, like we can talk all the craziness we want about Republicans in the GOP, but within the Democratic establishment, there are individuals who want to make it hard for other people to vote them out. They want to keep their jobs. Yeah. And they want to keep their power even more.
You see that in some instances, right? You see that people in power want to stay in power. And, if you were to ask them in theory, I bet some of these politicians, they would say, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's good. But when it comes to their race, they want to make sure that they stay in power. Well, we need to actually stick to principle instead of just what's going to be good for one or two politicians or whatever it is, right? No matter where you are, whether you're in New York or you're in Texas or Georgia or Kentucky, wherever it is.
And what does it take? It really takes us fixing the Senate to get this stuff moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take, I believe that on January 20th, 2021 at 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. And it's going to be a tremendous opportunity to make real progress on a lot of these issues that we've been talking about.
Julián Castro, ladies and gentlemen, would love to have you back on again. Also would love to have you in a political, did we lose him? Oh, there he is.
No.
Would love to have you in a political office too, man, because I know in hearing you speak, dealing with issues of qualified immunity, police reform, dealing with look, we're under a steep hill to climb with the amount of federal judges that have been put in place during this Trump administration. The lack of trust in government and government institutions is rightfully so, but it's a big hill for us to climb as a society because there's not a lot of trust.
Hey, y'all. No, thank y'all for having me on. And even more importantly, thank you for reaching that audience and getting folks, energized. And a lot of time, I know that a lot of folks, some of these issues they pay attention to. Some folks, they think, why should I go vote? But thank y'all for putting them out there so that people are exposed to them and people know the urgency of acting right now, that it makes a difference. All right.
Well, and we'd love to get your PAC involved over in Jersey. I don't know if you've taken a look at the state of New Jersey and its politics and some of the towns that need real change in Jersey. They need some attention brought to what's going on over there in Bergen County, in Hudson County. There is some establishment Democrat BS that goes on right next door to New York State that needs some attention. So I know you're doing the people first.
Yeah.
But it would be amazing for you to really rally behind some of those neighborhoods over there because you have corporations and real estate corporations taking advantage of these communities that sit right on the river here close to Manhattan. And so
Yeah.
you have issues with how much it costs to actually commute to work. Tax abatement issues and the amount of money actually flowing into communities from these big real estate developments that are going up along the water. So it might be something for you guys to look at and really rally behind right here next door to New York and New Jersey as well.
All right. No, we'll take a look at that for sure. Thanks for putting me on the trail.
Yeah, man.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for your time today.
Okay, y'all.
Julian. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Julian Castro, thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care.
Thank you.